Highway funding puts lawmakers in a bind. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Jackie Borchert, Columbus Bureau Chief for the Cincinnati Enquirer, Joe Ingles, State House reporter for Ohio Public Radio, Sam Gresham of Common Cause Ohio, and Shannon Jones, former state legislator. Ohio lawmakers may have to decide soon on a big hike in the gasoline tax. The state's top transportation official told lawmakers this week that his agency faces a $1 billion shortfall. ODOT's Jack Marchbank says the state has reached its credit limit and needs more highway money now. He told lawmakers they cannot put off any tough decisions any longer.
Past practices of borrowing and bonding have brought us to this troubled state. And we are here today because we need a better solution. Without one, our system of state and local roadways will fall into a dangerous state of disrepair.
Jackie Borchert, as we record this program on Friday afternoon, we're still waiting to hear Governor DeWine's task force recommendation on funding. We assume it's going to be a gas tax. How much of a gas tax increase are we looking at? Do we know?
Well, Director Marchbank said that about a 1 cent increase would generate about $65 million a year. So when you're talking $1 billion shortfall that's being projected, you do the math there, and we're looking at, north of 25 cents a gallon.
Would double it because it's 28 now.
Right, it's 28 now. It would double it, but we would still be below Pennsylvania and I think technically Michigan, because they have a combination of a flat rate tax and a percentage tax. I think it's important to note that the $1 billion he's talking about is a little bit less than $1 billion, and that's 10 years from now. So, next year it's projected to be at about $156 million, and then gradually grow to a bigger amount, and that's because of road maintenance and road widening projects that they anticipate.
Joe Ingles, lawmakers are really excited, particularly Republican lawmakers are excited to have to decide this, I'm guessing.
Well, no one likes a gas tax, right? But they are building a consortium out there of Republicans and Democrats who will go for the gas tax just because it's essential. I mean, they've got to do something. The roads are crumbling, and anyone who drives the roads right now, they're talking about, the potholes and all the problems with them. So something has to happen, and I think they're getting the consensus they need from this group that's looking at the problem in a non-political way and giving some cover.
Shannon, of all taxes, is a gas tax the easiest to accept for an anti-tax lawmaker because it's kind of a user fee? You're paying the gas tax, it's going right back to the roads.
Look, I mean, nobody wants to raise a tax, but in this instance, all you have to do is drive around to understand that these major infrastructure projects aren't going to fix themselves. So to the extent that everybody agrees that this is a priority for their communities, we have to get the money from somewhere.
But still, Republicans would face criticism from their side if they vote to raise it.
Sure, that's why that if they're going to raise the tax, they need to raise it sufficiently to be able to solve the problem and to be able to address issues like, there are other things that are on our roads now that isn't just propelled by gasoline. So what do we think about, hybrid and natural gas and other things that we've got to have a structure that can sustain us well into the future.
In the old days of, 10 miles to the gallon, they're gone.
They are
Electric
gone.
cars are here. Public transit's more important.
They are gone. But for a person like me, I think this is a strategic position where I can attack the legislative because they only give 2% of their revenue to urban transportation or mass transportation at all. If you want to get my vote, you got to talk about more than 2% of the money going to mass transportation. On a local level, most mass transportation systems gets 52% of that money from the local level. And you made a point. The future is not across the road. The future is multimodal. And when the urban situation gets bigger and bigger, they got to have money to solve those problems because the state is just kicking the can down the road. Somebody's got to take care of that problem. Now, we can talk about 28%. You're right. Pennsylvania has 53%. I think.
53 cents a gallon, yeah.
Yeah. So we're behind.
I think Sam raised an important point that any increase in the gas tax, according to the Constitution, has to go into the road and highway and bridge maintenance and construction. And so transit advocates have said, look, if we're going to do this, we need to cut some sort of deal where mass transportation gets some cut of this money. I think they proposed like a 20% cut, and of course that might require some legal finagling, maybe a change in the Constitution. But the point they're raising is if we invest more in mass transportation, then that may reduce the maintenance that you need to do in the future, because ideally fewer people would be traveling the roads.
And if you think about it, millennials are not driving as much as generations before them. So they don't own cars, a lot of them. They don't want to own a car. They're looking more for mass transit, which we don't have, which is probably one of the reasons that those young people decide to leave, because our state is not built with that. So, I mean, there's a lot of good, if you think about it, there's a lot of good food for thought when you look at this transportation issue in whole and decide where to put the money.
Shannon, what about other ideas? Oregon has a per mile user fee. You have a little device that goes in your car, and each mile you drive, you get a charge, and then you can deduct your gas tax that you've paid. It's kind of very complicated, but that way electric vehicles have to pay.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know what the solution is, but it's clear that we need to address the fact that gasoline-powered vehicles aren't the only thing using our roads. And so, we've got to have this transportation budget in place in, 6 weeks from now? So sometimes having something really complicated is hard to do in a short period of time. But it is something that for every year that goes by and there's more and more dependence on non-gasoline powered vehicles, the harder it is to make the structural change.
Do we expect anything, Jackie, innovative in this panel's recommendation, or is we just going to stick with the gas tax because that's the easiest, the cleanest thing to do?
I mean, that's the only thing publicly that has been signaled as something that they could reach consensus on. I think Shannon makes a great point that we're in a time crunch to get the transportation budget through. So while there are a lot of innovative ways to try to make this fair and raise revenue, and these have been tried in other states, they're not like completely new ideas. It would be a huge lift to put in place by the end of March.
All right. Sherrod Brown is halfway through his listening tour of early primary and caucus states. In New Hampshire, he attracted decent-sized crowds and media attention as he compared populism to that of the president's.
His phony populism is you divide people and you push people down to lift some others up. And real populism is not racist. It's not anti-Semitic. It doesn't divide people. It doesn't do hate speech. And real populism is fighting for workers.
Brown still plans to visit Nevada and South Carolina before making a final decision on a White House run. But Sam Gresham, it's looking like more and more like he's going to jump in based on the buzz he's getting, the crowds he got in New Hampshire.
I think there's an echo chamber here that's not sure. The coast, east and west, are not sure they want to support Sherrod. They're not on board. His serendipity and his small town approach, really, which is not small town. Lorraine's not a small town, and not Cleveland either. But he has this image that I don't think resonates well, his dignity of work tour. But if you go back and look at Sherrod's record, 13 years in the Senate, 12 years in the House, 8 years as Secretary of State and in the General Assembly, this is not a young guy. He knows the ropes. I don't know what, in the end, what's going to happen with him, but I don't think he's the Beto, whatever you call it.
Beto O'Rourke, yeah.
Beto O'Rourke, man, this guy shines. Sherrod doesn't shine like that. And the question becomes, who do you team Sherrod with as a VP candidate? That it's a hard combination. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Shannon, how do Republicans view Sherrod Brown?
Look, I think Sherrod Brown is probably the strongest candidate out there in the Democrat field, but that's precisely why he can't make it out of a Democrat primary. I mean, he's staying away from those tough issues like Medicare for All and the new Green Deal, and that's not where his party is. And so he really wants to run. He's trying to see if there's, a lane in the middle, but I don't think the party's going to let him.
Do we see that? Because primaries always start that way, far to the right or far to the left. And it does sort of come back to the middle. Do we see the Democratic Party doing that? They're pretty far out there right now, Joe.
Well,
Some
that's
candidates,
true.
anyway.
But in order for the Democrats to win, they're going to have to get back some of those people who have voted for Trump. and President Trump. And those voters are not over there on the left. They're not over there with the green energy and all that. And so, I think they also, one of the things you have to consider when you're voting in a primary is, does this person have a shot of winning? If it's a person that you're electing on that in the Democratic Party who has no shot of winning in November, you're ceding 4 more years to President Trump.
That's the buzz he got in New Hampshire, Jackie, was this guy's electable. And that's
Right.
what the message I think he wants to send out there.
Right, I think Joe really nailed it. It's going to come down to, do you want someone who can beat Trump or someone who shares your laundry list of liberal values? And I think what we're hearing right now, the loudest voices in the room are saying, yes, you have to do Medicare for all. Yes, you have to do Green New Deal. Yes, you have to do carbon emissions, and the list goes on and on. But I mean, it's still very early. We don't even have a field together. Sherrod's not even running officially yet. And so, I mean, that's kind of the question. And what we saw in 2016 is, Bernie Sanders pulled Hillary Clinton to the left on some positions. But in the end, voters overwhelmingly said, we want Clinton because we think she can win.
Let's look at the history, and let's be honest with ourselves. The last 2 Democrats who won were middle-of-the-roaders. They were not lefties, all right? Clinton was not a lefty. He was straight down the middle of the road, and sorry to my heart, Barack was not a lefty either. I wanted him to be a lefty, but he wasn't. So the idea that we have to find someone who spins in a ball in the middle that bumps to the left at times and then bumps to the right at times and stays in the middle of the road makes sense. Among the people who are out there right now, the primary is going to push them so far to the left. They got Sherrod's probably the only one that could find a way back to the center. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, look, that certainly makes sense, but I don't think that Sherrod's going to be allowed to stay in the middle. I mean, that's in essence going to be the problem, is that the primary is going to push him as far to the left as possible, and he's not nearly as well-known commodity nationally as Hillary Clinton was. And so, he's out there having to define himself for voters for the very first time, and the enthusiasm in the party is on the very far left.
One way to define him is the Democratic debates, and they have some rules for the first set. They're really hard to follow. We should have a graphic, but there's going to be 2 days of debates. They're going to split the field in half if they have to, limited to 20 candidates. You got to have at least 1% in the polls or have 65,000 individual donations. Can Sherrod do that?
He would not survive, I don't know, on a stage of 20. That is extremely hard.
It'll be 2 10s.
Well, okay, 2 10s. But I mean, look at the Republican debates, back in 2015. That was, anybody who watched that coming in with an open mind left it not knowing anything more than when they started. Yeah. It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Well, it opened the door for Donald Trump.
It did.
And Joe, could that open the door for somebody who's a more radical liberal than perhaps can win in a general?
It certainly could, and it could open the door. It's probably the person who has the most name recognition at that point that's going to benefit from that.
I think one of the things that are lurking in the background that was people didn't like, but it was effective last time, was the superdelegate. We no longer have superdelegates. So you're talking about people bouncing to the left. There's nothing out there to make them come back to the center like the superdelegates are. So I think if I portend for the future of the Democratic Party, the candidate who wins will be more to the left than our previous candidates, Clinton and Barack Obama. But I'm saying running up against Donald Trump, who's a horrible candidate, you may have a shot.
All right. Another Ohio Democrat is looking to run for president, Congressman Tim Ryan of Youngstown.
Would you consider running for president? Your name's been bandied about.
Yes, I will, and I have, and I am, and I'm having conversations
Wait a minute,
right now.
You are definitely going to run for president.
No, I didn't say that. I am considering. That was good, though. Neil, you're good at this. You're good at this.
So what are you considering?
There are running.
That's about as specific as he got. No timetable for that decision. He would be another Midwestern moderate voice in the increasingly crowded field of Democrats. Joe Ingles, Tim Ryan has thought about running for governor, then Senate, then governor. Is this time he going to pull the trigger?
Well, and he's also thought about running for the head of the DNC. So, I mean, you know, he's thought about running for a lot of stuff, but he really hasn't actually ran for anything other than the position, you know, he's in. And of course, he was at the State House before that. The thing is, what does he bring to the table? And that's the big question. You know, Sherrod Brown brings this dignity of work message. And it's also something that Joe Biden would bring if Joe Biden would pop in there too. And Joe Biden has more name recognition, but we won't go there. But, you know, what does Tim Ryan bring to the table? And the question is, you know, he kind of brings the same message as Sherrod, but not as strong with not as much history.
He's younger. That's probably the one difference, Jackie, is he is a younger version of Sherrod Brown. And that would that appeal to a younger Democratic primary voter? An anti-establishment Democratic voter, because he took on Nancy Pelosi.
Anti-establishment until he ended up voting for Nancy Pelosi. So, you know.
And he said he wasn't going to vote for her.
He wasn't going to vote for her, right. He led the revolution. Yeah, I don't know. And name recognition is a stumbling block for him as well. You know, obviously his youth is a big plus. He's from, you know, that part of the state that pundits have said for the last 2.5 years, you know, Ohio went for Trump, and you know that area is reflective of the national attitude. So I mean, he brings those things to the table. But like Joe said, I mean, I think the interview that I saw with him had asked, you know, well, what about Sherrod Brown's you know, message for workers? And he was like, oh no, I'm not going to do that. And then said, well, I'm going to focus on the economics of the worker. So I don't know how different that is, but you know, he's kind of the political boy who cried wolf. We'll see if he actually follows through on it.
It's hard for a congressperson to run for president because they just don't represent a lot of people.
That's
I mean,
right.
senators represent the whole states.
That's
Governors
right.
represent whole
and it's
states.
hard for senators to run for president. I mean, you know, there's an awful lot of votes out there that people can look to share their dissatisfaction with that candidate. But when now you're looking at one of 16 congressional districts, it's a pretty small area.
Right. I think it is. I think the background of our current president, people underestimated the effect of his television show on the electorate. People just underestimated that and worked for him. I don't think Mr. Ryan is serious about anything. I think there's things that happen to political candidates when they get the light, and the light says you're going to run for president, and they all like soaking up that light, so they don't want to give it up. They'll keep that thing long as they can.
Well, and he's in a really safe district. I mean, he's good for a while.
68%? Who would give that up?
Well, see, in the past, if he was going to run for governor or for U.S. Senate, he was going to have to give up his seat.
Right.
That safe seat. Now he can kind of run for president for 6 months and then say, you know what, time's not right. I'm going back to my seats. Maybe that's what happened.
I'll tell you something about running for president. You have to have an ego beyond belief. You have to be on the grind. You got to make that phone call. You got to show up at all those places. You got to deal with all these idiots. He's not built for that, man.
All right, Ohio's new Secretary of State is complying with state law. Frank LaRose is clearing, some would say purging, Ohio's rolls of voters who have been inactive for 6 years. Former Secretary of State John Husted started this process by sending out notices to inactive voters. LaRose is taking it one step further, sending out another notice along with voter registration forms to those being purged. Sam Gresham, you work with Common Cause, big voter rights organization. What do you think of this effort to send out registration forms?
I don't think it's a bad idea. Nothing hurts.
Yeah.
But what I like are the backups that we have here. 4 years to respond. If you go to sign up for your driver's license, you're automatically registered. And then, before that's over, you got a last chance card that they send.
But the driver's license, you're not automatically registered. Is that you have the option? Yeah.
It's a new change that former Secretary of State Husted
Oh, so
put in place
when
last
you
year.
re-register your license, you automatically, if it's still the same address, you can re-register.
You're good.
Yeah.
All right, so all of that is okay, but it's still an attempt by the Republican Party, to get rid of voters. That is un-American in my way of living. If you are a breathing individual, you have a right to vote. Why put obstacles in front of you? Now, the backups work. Now, I love the backups, so I'm okay.
All right, Shem?
I mean, look, nobody's taking anybody's right away to vote. The question is this: how much of taxpayer money are we willing to spend to chase after people to do something that they're already able to do today by law. You know, so there have been several attempts made. They very little return on that public investment. How many times are we going to keep chasing that? You know, if you want to register everybody automatically, you know, fine by me. It's not going to change who engages in the election. That's the big issue. But, you know, continuing to spend more taxpayer dollars when it's something they can already do, that's the question that in a time of limited resources, we have to be asking ourselves.
We're talking what I read was $70,000 for these additional mailings. If the county boards of elections go along with this, they have to go along with this as well. You'd assume most counties would do that, I guess. But how many folks, we're talking 270,000 people have been purged from the rolls, Joe?
Yeah, but the thing is that a lot of these people are legitimate. First of all, they are not people, you know, who are actual voters. They might have had an issue that they've been counted twice for some reason, or they've moved, or you know, something. And so there's that. There's also as Shannon says, you know, the thing is, people are trying to get out there to vote, and you want them to vote, but all these things cost money. So if you're a county and you're already strapped for funds, where do you want to put your priorities? Is it in this or something else?
Yeah,
And I think, you know, new Secretary of State Frank LaRose has said, you know, we can keep this in place, but he wants to focus his energy on making sure people don't even get to that place by, you know, more opportunities for, like when you interact with a government service, as you do like for welfare benefits, all your information gets updated. That's what he kind of sees. So, and we talk about, you know, what's the return, what's the cost. Some 8,000 people were kept on the rolls because of this second last chance, you know, mailing. So, you know, for those 8,000, every vote counts, and for 8,000 people, that's important.
All right. Social media can be an effective tool for politicians. Ask President Trump. It's a good way to communicate directly with the public, a way to engage with them, but engagement works both ways, and politicians often hear more from opponents than they do from supporters. And you have to be careful about how you treat those opposing views on social media. That's where State Senator Joe Eaker and his Facebook page comes in. The Cincinnati Republican, the Cincinnati area Republican, is pretty active on social media. In December, he posted his support of the Heartbeat anti-abortion bill. That prompted an opposing response from Anthony Fambry, which led to Senator Eaker blocking Fambry, basically tossing him off his state Senate Facebook page. Well, courts have said blocking political speech on politicians' official social media sites violates the First Amendment. Fambry sued, and this week, Eaker agreed to pay him $20,000 in a settlement. Shannon Jones getting blocked, man, 20 grand. But you're a former lawmaker. You're very active on social media. How do you deal with opposing views, or what some would call trolls?
Look, you know, I've had my fair share, and for the vast majority of people who are just trying to express their views, it's you know, not a big deal. I appreciate now, as I did then, those who want to do that. There is a line, though, where some people cross, where I think it could be abusive. And so, you know, I don't know what the remedy is, but the thing about social media is it allows people, if used properly, to communicate with a lot of people in real time. And
did you engage with them? Go back and forth sometimes?
Not usually. And I think when I did, I usually regretted that because because you know, it's there is a desire to express yourself, and if you know, it'd be one thing to say, well, reasonable people can disagree on matters of policy, but usually in the heat of the moment, reasonableness is out the door.
You don't change your mind.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. You're not going to change your mind on social media anyway. I mean, how many times do you have someone, you know, have a different point of view or whatever, and you see people go back and forth? No one changes their mind. They just get nastier as they make their comebacks. So,
and this is the type of person who gets inside of that media. People who are voracious tweeters are angry people. They're people who have their opinion. You couldn't convince them in 1,000 years that what you're saying is right, and they have the ability not to agree with you.
But official sites, you can't can't
I mean, if
stifle
you're-
somebody's free speech, is what they're saying.
A handful of courts have ruled on this and said, you know, if you're creating what's essentially a public forum for constituents to exchange things with you, then you need to allow that. And interestingly enough, since I wrote the story earlier this week, I've heard from a number of people who said they have been unblocked from certain politicians' social feeds
fear of suit?
recently. So maybe, you know, the guy, Anthony Fambry, who filed the suit, said he didn't really, you know, care what happened as long as it created some change.
But you know what? The other thing too is you have the ability not to block everybody. And so if that becomes the trend, then what are we really accomplishing?
All right, let's get to our off-the-record final parting shots. Shannon Jones, you're up first.
Well, I think that the legislature will end up with a pretty substantial gas tax increase. Whether they want to do that or not is another story, but there's no doubt we really do need it.
Sam.
Sherrod Brown is going to be an interesting political piece in how it finally plays out, where he ends up as a VP candidate or as a presidential candidate. And the dynamics about surrounding that, y'all going to spend a lot of ink on.
All right, Joe.
Well, if you think about this gas tax at a quarter, and you add that up on a 15-gallon tank, that's $3.75 a week, an extra $1.95 a year. And for families who are on the margins, barely able to afford things, you take that and you have the price of gas go up, it could really be an issue for them.
And Jackie.
This week was the anniversary of the Parkland shooting, and as we know in Ohio, Governor Kasich's gun proposals didn't materialize last session, and actually an AP review found that most states did not take action.
All right. If you look closely at Anthony Fambry's picture on his Facebook page, you'll see, like me, he is a Patriots fan, a New England Patriots fan. So that could be the reason why Senator Eaker blocked him, which I think the courts have ruled to be constitutional, to block Patriots fans. Anyway, that is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We won't block you, we promise. And you can connect to all of that at our website, wosu.org, where you can see each one of these episodes on demand so you can watch it whenever you want. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.